Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about planning an accessible wedding. I was supposed to get married next month, and I'm no longer getting married because of the apocalypse. I shouldn't say not getting married, I'm getting married next year in June. So I have a long time to plan my wedding, and I kind of already did a lot of the planning, but not all the details. What I am going to talk about today is not specifically so much wedding planning and all the details, but about an accessible wedding and how I'm making my wedding accessible for myself. So first I'm going to go over some of the things that I think people might find useful when they're planning their own wedding to make it accessible for themselves and their guests, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about what I'm doing specifically. Since everybody has such varied limitations when it comes to abilities or disabilities, however you want to phrase it, I think it's impossible to have this one-size-fits-all sort of, here's a checklist of all the things that you should consider. But hopefully this will get your brain kind of working, and you'll probably already know to some degree what it is that you think that you need for your wedding to make it more accessible for yourself. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about what you can do to make your wedding more accessible. Don't just think of you and your partner, think about your guests. Ask the question maybe on your invitations whether anybody has any limitations or restrictions, and then follow that through when you're actually confirming the RSVPs. The question of whether your guests have a food allergy is obviously going to be on there, but you also want to ask about any physical limitations. You could do this just by asking, is there any way that we can accommodate you in any specific way? Please let us know. It might be really helpful to just invite a smaller number of people so that you have less stress in general. So a lot of people have schedules, but I think it's really good to just post a schedule before the wedding actually happens so that people who have any sort of limitation or need to sort of like figure out a way to accommodate themselves can do that. So you might want to have, say, a Facebook page that has the schedule on it that everybody can access, or because not everybody's on Facebook, you might want to just send that through an email, or of course, mail. An example of somebody who may need to actually see the schedule would be somebody who has maybe a mobility problem and they don't want to be running around from place to place to place to place, so they want to know that beforehand and then actually talk to you about it, saying, that might be an issue. Or it could be something like they have diabetes and they really need to know exactly when they're going to be eating, because they need to know when they need to eat in order to be able to sustain and hold themselves off until the next meal, which is going to be the dinner at your wedding. So another thing you might want to consider is a brunch wedding, because usually they have more of a casual vibe in terms of the length of time. They're usually shorter because of the dress code. So people can wear something that's a bit more casual and airy. And also in terms of the food, in terms of everything, the dancing, you don't necessarily need to have a whole dance afterwards. So that might be something that you want to either have separately on its own, or maybe combined with having like a small wedding, so a small brunch wedding. And that's just less stress overall. One of the more obvious things is making sure that the whole venue is accessible and that there's not so many different locations if somebody has a mobility aid. So that would mean maybe something like a wheelchair, a walker, a cane. You want to make sure that all of the flooring is level and that this person doesn't have to travel from place to place to place. And maybe that's you, maybe that's yourself. The other thing to consider is that heritage buildings and older buildings don't always have wheelchair ramps or elevators or escalators, things that might really be useful for people who have trouble with stairs. So that's something you're going to figure out when you're going and checking out the venues. You can also call ahead of time, but it's great to see the space. Another thing to consider is having the tables at the reception spaced far enough apart so that people who do need a little bit more room to get around can actually get around the tables when they're trying to go in and out to go to the washroom or get up to go get a drink. And another thing you might want to ask is whether, the people who do have mobility devices want to be seated at the front or at the back. Like, what would their preference be? Especially if they're somebody who's in the bridal party, or they're, the mother or the father of the groom or the bride. You might want to have them at the front. It's probably the best thing to do. So you're going to want to make sure that, they can actually get there, that, again, the ground is level, that, they're not stuck in the back and feel like they're not a part of this. Food restrictions and allergies are kind of a very typical thing anyhow, but I just thought I would mention them in case. These can be really serious, so you really should take it seriously, because if somebody has an anaphylactic reaction, that's going to kind of ruin their day and ruin your day, and that's not fun. So, on that note too, if you're the bride or the groom, you're going to get even more special treatment in terms of eating that day, but you do need to figure out what it is you're going to do for your food. If the staff can't make you something, they should be able to make you something. Make sure there's a fridge if you do have to bring your own food or you need to bring it for your guests. Some venues will say, we can accommodate the food and put it into the fridge for you, but we can't make that kind of food because it's too special. One of the things you might want to consider is the weather, in terms of, is it too hot or too cold of this time of year, or in this space that you're having the reception and the ceremony take place. And that might be a consideration that you have to take for some of the more important guests as well. My wedding is going to be scheduled a year from now because of the temperature, and that really is a very important thing for me particularly, because I won't be okay if it's too hot or too cold. It's not something that is just I'm being fussy. It's just that I will get pretty sick and be pretty miserable. So that's why it's going to be when it's scheduled for. Having enough chairs both inside and outside is also a great idea for your guests in case they really need to sit down. And since a lot of weddings have dancing involved and just generally are loud because there's a lot of people, being mindful of loud spaces, noisy spaces, and bright lights and flashing lights is really important as well for those who might have epilepsy or for things like sensory overload. Having a live stream option for your wedding is a great idea. I love this one because I think there's a lot of people that feel that they want to attend places, they want to go places, and they can't because they're just too sick, and that might be a last minute thing for them. So having a live stream option is a really great idea. Let your photographer know what you can and can't tolerate in terms of physical standing, sitting, moving, what have you. Also in terms of, how far you can go, how many locations you can do, what your energy level is like, as well as that of the people that are the most important to those photo shoots. Asking the people who have mobility aids or letting your photographer know if you do have one and you don't want it in the shot is a really good idea, because maybe some people don't want it in there and maybe some people do. Consider whether you or somebody else needs to remain seated during the photo shoot, or maybe you can sit down in between the photo shoot or break up the photo shoot. Maybe it's you or your partner who needs to sit down during the photo shoot because of your energy levels or physical abilities. So maybe you want to do some photos of the two of you standing and then just go take a break and do some of the photos sitting and then some of the photos standing again. And on that note, choose fewer locations and add some extra time for your photos. Another thing that you could do with your mobility devices and mobility aids is that you could decorate them. I think that's a really cool idea. If there's someone in your family, especially children, who are mentally challenged or they have a condition like autism, you might want to tell the photographer ahead of time so that the photographer understands that this person isn't just acting up, they have a condition, and that might help the photographer and the other person a little bit more. And you also might want to check with the venue if service dogs or service animals are allowed. So now I'm going to talk about some of the things that I'm going to do personally to make my wedding more accessible for myself. I'm the one who has some limitations. My partner's fine, but I do have a lot of different conditions and they manifest in so many different ways. So it's really, I'm not going to go into detail about exactly everything and why because it's really complicated, but basically the main thing that I'm going to be accommodating for myself is the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So my connective tissue is very fragile and that can lead itself to a lot of different issues. And the other component would be I have a lot of digestive problems, so that's definitely going to come into play. One of the things I'm going to do is pack a medical bag, and it's going to be on wheels so that I don't injure my shoulder or my wrists or anything like that, and so I don't have to lug something with me around everywhere. So I'm just going to have probably a little luggage size, carry-on size bag, and put all of my medical things in there along with probably some water just to keep hydrated, like an electrolyte fluid or something like that in there. And that way I can take it to the photo shoot and then to the venue, to the reception, etc. I'll include things like my medicine and also a different pair of shoes and things like that in my bag. The photo shoot is the most important thing to me, so that's kind of brought its own challenges, and I would really love to do a million different locations, but That's just not going to happen because I've got way too long of a day and way too much to organize and plan and deal with on that day. So I've chosen 2 locations to do the photos at. That would be the venue and then one other location that we're going to start doing the photos first thing in the morning. So I'm going to have my reveal because that's when I have most of my energy, and I feel like that's probably when I'm going to be most active is during the photo shoot. And then I'm going to make sure that I'm wearing my compression stockings and a good pair of shoes, and only have my really crazy heels for like ones where I'm sitting down or for like a split second when I'm standing, and then just change it from there and then wear those the rest of the day, like the more comfy shoes. I'm also going to rent a wheelchair because I'm pretty sure that I'm going to need it. I think that at some point, and it's just kind of more of like a security thing because I do lose a lot of energy. I get very faint. I have been known to collapse. So I think it's probably better if I just have a wheelchair and, you know, make sure that that doesn't happen. And I mean, of course, I'm going to take as much breaks and like sitting as I need to. And I also have the bridal suite that I can go to when things are getting a little bit too much and I'm too overloaded, because I do have some sensory overload. So I will be making sure that I have that safe, quiet space that I can go to with my medical things and just kind of like take a break. In terms of food, I mean, I made sure that the kitchen knows that I have some restrictions and a list of like what I can and can't eat, but I'm on a mostly pureed diet, so I haven't really figured out what I'm going to do for the rest of the day before dinner. So that's going to be a challenge for sure, and I'll get back to you on that one. A weird little detail that I've realized is going to be essential for me is making sure that my bouquet is not too heavy, because I do get soft tissue damage in my wrists, and that's when I'm usually holding something heavy for too long. So because I'm going to have it for the photo shoot and for my ceremony, I want to make sure that I don't injure my hands because I need them. So that's going to be something that I'm going to consider as well. Like I mentioned earlier, the temperature is really important to me, so I'm doing my photo shoot first thing in the morning when it is a lot cooler out. And that way I'm not in the beating sun when I do my photo shoot or at all that day. And then later on I could do the ceremony. I mean, we will have that outside in the sun, but it will be more the evening time. So there's, you know, that's definitely going to help somewhat. So I'm a photographer and filmmaker, and my fiance is also a filmmaker. And the photography is very, very, very important to me. I also studied makeup artistry, and I also love fashion. So that part of it is going to be like one of the biggest parts of it for me. So my dress is a really heavy dress. There's a lot of material. It has a long train. It's something that I absolutely love, and I don't want to change it in any kind of way, but it's definitely going to be something that I feel like I need to change the dress later on. And I was never that person to feel like it was a good idea to have 2 dresses. Like, I always thought that was kind of weird, and I want to wear my dress for the whole night because I love my dress. But as I thought about it a little bit more, I thought, you know what, I think it's going to be a better idea for me to have a separate reception dress. And I found one for like $20, which I absolutely love. It's this short dress that has a chiffon layer over top with its own chiffon train. So yeah, more than happy with that dress. I think it's awesome. I'll be changing it partway throughout, and in the meantime, if I have to, I'm gonna take the train and make sure that it can pin up to my hip, which is something that most dress stores will do for you, because most people don't want their train dragging throughout the entire night anyway. So if I need to sit in the wheelchair, I feel like it's gonna be okay to just like kind of gather it up and sit on it. I mean, by that point, I will have already worn it for the ceremony, so it's not a big deal. I'm going to be having somebody do my hair and my makeup, not because I don't feel like I can do it myself or even want to, but I do have some tremors, and my tremors get worse when I'm stressed. So I feel like it's going to be better just to have somebody else do it, and I'm going to do a makeup trial because I want to make sure that, first of all, it's done the way that I like, but also because I'm chemically sensitive. So I can't really handle any artificial scents. That goes for my makeup and my hairspray, and I am allergic to a lot of different makeups, especially around the eye area. So I will be trying out some stuff beforehand and bringing my own hairspray that doesn't have any scent. I think L'Oreal has a brand. My mom gets it, but I don't personally have any hairsprays without a scent because I don't have hairspray because I don't use it because of the scent. I'm going to try that one out. I'm going to try some other ones out, see how I like it. And I guess that's really it for my hair and my makeup side of it. And lastly, I'm going to bring some BioFreeze because I know I'm going to get injured, especially because I've got terribly high heels that I'm going to be wearing for even just a fraction of a second. So that's definitely something I'm going to need. And that is the conclusion of all of the things that I've been thinking about to make my wedding more accessible for myself. And I would love to hear what you guys have done for your weddings, if you've done a wedding that you plan to be a bit more on the accessible side. Thanks so much for watching my channel. I hope to see you again soon.